minutes of a conversation today. So, again, we're just so thrilled to have everybody here today with us. I'm Judy Selzer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here along with my colleague, Sarah Ratcliffe. We are two of the co founders of the Virginia Women's Foundation. We are a new organization founded this past year here in Virginia statewide, working to empower women and girls to be leaders in their own lives and the world around them through economic development work, grant making, leadership development work. And this is one of our exciting programs, Women's Leadership on Boards. And today's conversation is designed to really help empower everybody and demystify the board process. Whether you're interested in serving on a corporate board of directors, a nonprofit board, or government board, there are so many avenues to board service and being engaged in the community and companies and really helping to shape the course of how they make an impact in Virginia and the broader world around us. So again, we are recording this conversation and will be posted online. And again, there'll be an opportunity for you all to ask questions towards the end, but you are welcome to put those in the chat as we go along so you don't forget them. So our three dynamic speakers, we are just so incredibly lucky to have these three talented individuals here with us today, sharing their wisdom, their experience, and mentoring us all on that path to board service. So without further ado, let me just give you a brief overview of each of our panelists, and then I'm going to invite them to tell you more of the intricate details and information about their background. So first, we have Ashley Reynolds Marshall. She works in the city of Charlottesville and is a lawyer and has her master's in public administration as well, and has been a leader in public service for decades, and just has tremendous wealth of experience in equity work and community programming and leadership, and of course, tons of board service. We're also joined today by Whitney Brown, who also has her master's in public administration, works for the city of Richmond, and again, tremendous dedication to really engaging the world around her to make it a better place than how she has found it, and works deeply in board service as well as government service. We're so excited to have her with us today. And we're rounded out by Stephanie Becker, who works with the National Association of Corporate Directors. And so her day job is helping people learn how to serve on boards and how to really dig in and lean into that kind of leadership and service. So we've got a really exciting conversation ahead of us. I'll be asking our panelists questions. They'll be having a conversation around it. And like I said, we encourage you to be dropping your thoughts and questions in the chat. And we're going to open it up towards the tail end for you to be asking those questions as well. So first and foremost, I'm going to invite each of our speakers to just tell us, take a deeper dive into your own backgrounds. Tell us a bit about who you are, how you came to board service, what have been some of the boards you have felt like you have made the most contributions on when you're serving on them. And with that, why don't we just start things off with Ashley? Would love to hear from you. And then we'll move over to Whitney and round it out again with Stephanie.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure and an honor to be able to chat with you all today. Again, my name is Ashley Reynolds Marshall. I currently serve as the Deputy City Manager for Social Equity for the City of Charlottesville, Virginia. But most of my career, I've actually spent working in nonprofits as well as serving on boards with them. Currently, I serve on two boards. I serve for the United Way of Greater Charlottesville on their board and as their program chair. And I also serve on 518, which is formerly known as Patrick Henry Family Services in Lynchburg, Virginia, both on their board as a member of their board of trustees. And then they also have a separate foundation. I'm also a member of that board in the executive committee. So that's my current board service, tailored a little bit back because of my local government work. But in the past, I've been honored to represent the areas that I lived and served as a member of the Virginia Council on Women, including several years as their board chair. I just rolled off leaving the board in very, very capable hands, excited to continue to see what they've done. And I've served on a variety of other nonprofit boards, typically focused in on direct human service. So really happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Hey, I'm up next. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Whitney Brown. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and that's also where I work as as chief of staff for the first voter district of City Council. And talking about my current board service, I currently serve as the secretary on the executive committee for the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, which is basically a nonprofit that's centered around implementing affordable housing in the city of Richmond and the metro area. I currently also serve on the Human Rights Commission for the city of Richmond, where we're focused in on intaking, violation of human rights in in the city of Richmond that constituents send us. And for fun, I also serve on two sports boards. I work as an official for the CVBOA, which is the local basketball board here in the city of Richmond, as well as the volleyball board. And in the past, I've served on boards, in college where I was president of Black Student Union and things like that. So I would always say, like, I've just been always engaged in my community and in the things that I'm passionate about.
Everyone. I'm happy to be here. Stephanie Becker with NACD, National Association of Corporate Directors. A little bit about myself and my journey into supporting board service. Throughout my career, I've worked for a variety of nonprofits and a private company, and it was kind of always this big mystery. What happens inside the boardroom? I took a bit of an interest in that and started to ask some more questions of our C-suite executives and different people who I knew were stepping in front of the board on a regular basis. Started working as someone who was there to assist the board and prep for board meetings, pull in the data that's so frequently shared, hear a bit more of those questions. And when I left my last role, which was supporting executives at that level, I said, I would really love to dig into board service. And kind of the next day heard from someone who said, have you checked in with NACD? And that's how I landed here about a year ago. What is so exciting to me about board service is every boardroom I have been in and been a part of is always there under a common goal. The mission and the values of the organization really drive a board meeting. And so it's just been really exciting to see how that can translate between government board service and not-for-profit board service, even private family-run boards, and how that can be a little bit of a niche and a little different. And then, of course, your Fortune 500, right? And what happens in those boardrooms. So excited to dive a little bit into that today and help a few of you hopefully decide what path or if board service is right for you.
Thank you. Well, our first question is if each of you can talk a little bit about your individual path to board service. How does it work, right? Were you involved with an organization and went to their president or chair and said, hey, how do I get on the board? Was there a formal application process, a call for board members? Did somebody tap you on the shoulder and put you through a program? How does it work? And differences you've seen in that process, along corporate, government versus nonprofit. Where's it been the same? Where's it been different? And so maybe Stephanie, since you just spoke last, we'll start again with you this time and then go back around to Ashley and Whitney.
Sure. I'm happy to kick us off. So I think one of the most important questions, and I feel like Ashley and Whitney would really agree with me, is are you ready to serve? The capacity of a director is one that can involve a lot of long nights, long meetings, trips, even for strategy sessions. And that is why one of the first things I recommend is if in your current corporate role, are you able to connect with your HR sponsor or perhaps your boss or someone who is really in charge of your development plan and say to them, hey, I'm interested in board service. I'm not sure in what capacity, but I'm looking for an opportunity to interact more at the board level. Sometimes that gets you into some really wonderful board meetings where suddenly you're hearing the questions that board directors are asking of the leadership of your organization or of your company. So I feel like just kind of from that logistics standpoint, get the support of the people who matter in your career. Some people will say, well, Stephanie, I'm already retired. I don't have a boss that I need to report to. And that's totally fine as well. Look at your network, go through your LinkedIn, who has those connections that can help you logistically understand where your connection into a boardroom might be. But again, it's really quite the time commitment, and you will hear quite frequently from the HR department or the CHRO that there is only the capacity for executives in a company, especially large private and public companies, to serve on one fiduciary board. And so that means that you could have offers from wonderful large public organizations, and at the end of the day you're only allowed to serve on one board at a time. So I would move kind of from that inquisition phase into deciding, okay, if this is really a place where I value my time and where I really do see serving, whether it's for not-for-profit, et cetera, what would that be, and what is my passion, and how does that overlap there? I am not a technology person. I'm not someone who's super into the nitty-gritty. If someone offered me a seat, or usually an invitation to interview for a super microchip company, et cetera, you can tell even by my voice and my body language, it doesn't really interest me. And knowing even like the risk and the reputation that you will associate to your board service, really just understanding that your passion needs to overlap there will make it a much easier journey from the search all the way to the service. So from the public and private capacity, Judith, that's what I would share about the journey to board service.
Thank you so much. And Whitney, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Sure. So I think you asked what paths we've taken to kind of serve on board. So I would say for me, I've both been invited and, through proactive engagement are the ways that I've been able to serve on boards. So for example, with the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust, when I was in college, I actually was an intern for them, and I worked for them for a while. And then I became a homeowner through their program, and was ultimately asked to be a part of the executive board committee as one of their homeowners, which was great. So now, I can kind of oversee the board direction and help the board make important decisions when it comes to project acquisition and, addressing housing inequities. And for the Human Rights Commission, that was actually through proactive engagement. So I just, saw that there were some vacancies on the board, and like my level of expertise, I saw that there were some gaps I could potentially fill on the board. And I really wanted to get involved and help that organization in any way that I can. So that's also what I recommend when it comes to, proactive engagement and wanting to get involved with boards. Like, just be involved. Like, a lot of board meetings, I can speak for myself, but a lot of these board meetings are public, are open to the public for public comment and for public input. And a lot of the times, you realize, wow, I really like the mission of this board and just, the direction they're going. I want to serve, whether that's in a volunteer capacity or in an official capacity. And I know a lot of boards now are even, really involving the youth in some of the boards. So some of the boards that I serve on, we do have youth board members, where, we take in a lot of their engagement and help them. They help us make decisions. So I would say that's kind of how I really got involved in board service and just, taking organizations from one step to another.
Thank you. And Ashley, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Sure. I, like my colleagues on the panel, have been involved in boards through various ways, everything from showing interest in the organization to having an organization actually reach out. So 518, for example, and I give them kudos for what I'm about to share, reached out to see if I would be interested in sharing because of my work in direct human service. They focus in on providing support for mothers and youth. They previously ran a group home. They don't do that anymore. We're focusing on kinship and other methods of adoption. But at the time that I was invited onto the board, they actually had never had an African-American woman serve on their board. I was running the YWCA at the time, and they asked me, because part of our focus is on eliminating racism for YWCA work. And so I actually told them that the fact that they were honest with me and asked me is in part one of the reasons why I very adamantly said yes. And I've been on that board for several years now. I really appreciate the work that they do. Specifically for the state service that I was able to do, you apply. So you go and you apply at the Secretary of Commonwealth's website for the available boards. You never know which one you're going to get. If you're going to get one, so I do recommend list a few that you may be interested in. And if you don't get it the first time, by the way, I didn't, apply again. And I think through some of those opportunities became others. Sometimes you just get thrown into it. For United Way of Greater Roanoke or Greater Charlottesville, I used to work for United Way of Roanoke Valley, and the CEO was my direct supervisor at the time. She is now the CEO. When I took this job, messaged the CEO here and said, steal this person. That's literally how I got asked to be on the board, is because my old boss said, you should steal this person. And so I think that what's important, again, I agree with Stephanie, really think about the time. Also think about your limitations and be honest. So for example, because of some of the ethical rules for city managers that fall to deputies and assistants as well, there are certain things I can't do. But I'm very honest with my boards, for example, if I can't fundraise for them, but maybe I can help write the letter or do some marketing, something else to help the fundraising. But here in the city of Charlottesville, for example, asking for a sponsorship from a business may make the business think maybe I have an in with the city. So all of those things, you have to think through your time commitment, financial commitments, any conflicts you may have with your current or future work, because your board term may be 3 years, for example, if you know you're about to, for example, maybe graduate from a master's program, move into the workforce in year 2. All of those things are really great things to consider, but also be bold and be brave. If there's an organization you want to be involved in, send that letter. What's the worst that could happen is that you send an email and they say, we don't have space, or thank you very much, and you don't, or maybe you don't even hear anything back, but you're not really out of a lot, and maybe you could end up landing a board seat somewhere where you really are interested in the work and really could be of service.
Thanks. And I think you're leaning into a area that folks are really interested in, which is what exactly is entailed with board service, right? You're so smart to mention, hey, what's the passion? Is there a values connection? As Stephanie was talking about it, Ashley, as you're saying, hey, are there conflicts of interest with your day job? Right, Whitney, everybody, you're all talking about what's the, is this 1 year, is this 3 years? What's the responsibilities? Are you fundraising? Are you making business decisions? So if you could each talk a little bit about, from your own perspective and vantage point, what are maybe some of the top 2 or 3 responsibilities of being a board member from your own experience that folks should be thinking about as they consider board invitations that they get, or they consider starting to reach out to organizations, whether public or private, that they might want to get more engaged with. And Whitney, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I would say for me, most of my responsibilities really include financial oversight, strategic guidance, and supporting the organization's mission. So just making sure that I do the work that kind of commits to those goals. So I think Ashley brought up a good point about like fiduciary duties. So, as a board member for most boards, you are responsible for supporting your board also in financial ways. So making sure we're all donors of the board, maybe once a year that we donate a specific amount of money to the board. And even, like I said, supporting the board through time. So there are times where, depending on what kind of board that you serve on, where there might be external events where they need volunteers to help carry out a certain duty. So, we'll help with some of those responsibilities. And as well as, like I said, making sure we're supporting the organization's missions. So making there are a lot of decisions, I would say, especially for the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust when it comes to acquiring properties. There are a lot of decisions that we have to make when it comes to if we want to acquire a certain property, making sure that it aligns with our mission, it aligns with our goals, our current goals and our future goals, and making sure that it's strategic in a way. So I would say those are some of the highlights of my responsibility, as well as even going back to more so my other boards, so like the sports boards that I work for, making sure that we're recruiting, new members to join our board and making sure, we have enough staff and capacity to ensure we can carry out all the responsibilities and duties that we have to, um, do the work that we do.
Thanks. Ashley, any additional experiences that you want to add to what kind of goes into being a board member, the things folks should be thinking about, what their responsibilities are going to be when they take on this kind of role?
Sure. So, digging a little bit from my past life of running nonprofits, we have a saying that we're looking for board members often who can provide at least one of 3 things: time, talent, treasure. Usually we're looking for someone that can do two of those three. I will give you the general example of when you can only do one. If you are Melinda French Gates and you are giving treasure, maybe I don't ask you as much about your time, perhaps. But for most of us who are serving on a board, your executive director or whoever you are supporting with that board service will really be looking for you to be able to provide those things. So really sit down before you start a board or maybe join your second board and figure out, can I give to each board that I'm serving on my best? And we know things happen, by the way. Things will happen with, for example, in nonprofits, the CEO that is running the nonprofit. We completely understand those things. But it is very hard for, and I'm going to lean a little bit more on the nonprofit side of the board. It's very hard when you are a CEO and you have a board where the majority of the board members maybe aren't doing some of the work because number one, you are responsible for the fiduciary solidity of that organization. Legally, by the way, not just something that we say. You are legally responsible as the board for that work. So that means making sure that the organization is fully funded, making sure that you're looking at the budget, making sure that there's nothing untoward happening, and the CEO or executive director is your staff member. They are the one person in that organization that reports directly to the board. And so it is actually a lot of responsibility just to make sure that everything just keeps swimming, to borrow Dory a little bit from Finding Nemo. But I think there also is a lot of rewards. So, what I've heard a lot from Whitney, especially, is she serves on boards that she is passionate about, that she has a connection to. She's passionate about her sports board. She's passionate about the land trust. The other thing, by the way, when I'm looking for time, talent, and treasure, and talent can be lived experience. The fact that Whitney has a home that is part of that land trust process is invaluable, because she understands what worked really well when she went through the process, what could have been improved, and she can have a conversation with individuals who are interested in a real conversation saying, I understand, like, this hurdle is a pain in the rear, but it's required. I know where you're at. Some boards actually require that. So for example, when again at the YWCA, I needed someone with lived experience of homelessness because of some of the funding I got. And one of my board members did have that. That doesn't mean that necessarily I talked about it often. She could talk about it if she wanted to. She knew I did need to disclose to our state funder that I had checked that box. But I noticed when she would speak up, especially when we were talking about our low-income housing programs, she had passion there because she's experienced it. So that is another thing that I think can be really helpful when you think of maybe where you can serve. If you're comfortable with things where you have experience in, that's helpful. Or if you're comfortable also taking your job into your board service. We need people who are accountants, because that means you can read my 990s and you can read my board, my financial ledgers, and give assistance also to your fellow board members on that. We need people who maybe have a background in law. We need writers who have English degrees. We need teachers if I'm helping to create a curriculum for racial equity. I do it really well for adults. I don't always work with youth. So I know that sometimes, my educators could help me make sure that if we were doing a presentation for youth, that I had it correct and had the pedagogy right, just because that's not my area of expertise. So sometimes we also fill in for expertise in the nonprofit world that we don't have on staff with our board members. So that again is another place where you get to serve and you get to shine, because often I may have asked you if you were interested in serving the board because I needed this function and I needed the help. So those are just some other ways, specifically with nonprofit boards, to think about maybe where you want to go, or if someone's asking you, maybe why they're asking you, just so that you're prepared to bring your work life and your expertise into that boardroom too.
Thanks. And Stephanie, talk with us a bit about the corporate board experience. What are those responsibilities there that maybe are similar to government or nonprofit boards, and what might vary? Because, right, certain, corporate boards, it's a paid role, not even volunteer. And so those responsibilities might vary in some ways.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. just to kind of pivot and shift here in the private and public space in the boardroom, Whitney, you actually touched on it immediately, which is oversight. The board's role is not to have their hands in the running and operations of the business. And I would say that pretty quickly that will help you differentiate what path of board service is right for you. Are you comfortable being more in a navigator seat versus a driver's seat? Second element, and Ashley, I think you touched on this, is there's some risk. You are tied by law to this organization, to this company. I'm sure several people on this call can recall the Bluebell ice cream, I think it was like Listeria outbreak. And those, that board was tried under law for liability of deaths involving people who ate the ice cream of the company that they serve for. And I don't bring that up to be, I don't know, I guess a negative connotation. I just mean in that element of really overlapping your passion, ensuring that you have the right time, the right connections, and to our points before, the right strengths on your remit, like ready to go. You really do need to consider if you're willing to fully attach your reputation to this company. Just to touch on a few other pieces, we do have a saying at NACD, nose in, fingers out, again, just reflecting that kind of key oversight piece. Also, we commonly will say the role of the director is to ask the questions, not have the answers. And that, to Ashley's point of, are you bringing some financial expertise? You are not being asked to prepare reports and dive into a balance sheet. You are asked to sit and ask questions of your executives to ensure that certain precautions or certain regulations have been met alongside the executive team with support. So just kind of want to differentiate those two elements, kind of to separate from the not-for-profit and really kind of the risk liability of serving on those for-profit boards.
Thanks. And I think that flows really well into our next question, which is, what are boards looking for when they're seeking new members? Is there a particular bio, a certain resume, and how does that again vary between a government board, a nonprofit board, or a corporate board? You know, what is that resume, that bio? Is there one typical one and that you should work towards, or does it vary in some ways? So maybe we'll start back again with you, Stephanie, looking at that corporate perspective.
Sure. I want to be very simple in my first statement about this question, which is we need women on corporate boards. I do not want to mince words. Every person here, I encourage you to look over your resume and think, what do I have to offer in that public or that private company setting? You know, the days of a bunch of white men sitting around a table on the 50th floor of the Empire State Building, you know, pointing at the peasants below are really gone in the ways of governance. Year over year, we have seen increases in minority representation, both of women and diverse cultures also. But it's still relatively low. I think in the Fortune 500, it only sits at about 22%. Don't quote me exactly, but it's like we haven't even crossed 1 out of every 4 people on a board being a diverse board member. Diversity of thought is frequently brought into the conversation of the skills matrix. If you sit on a public board, you're required to do that by law at annual increments. And so that might be bringing in a cybersecurity strength that you've developed over the past few years. That might be, to our point before, Whitney's so passionate, and she was really a member of her organization before she was a part of the board, a consumer of a product. And you are, I worked with a woman very specifically in her search for board service, and she said, I love shopping. I want to work for a consumer organization, and I want to talk about the consumer experience. And she was very passionate about that. I believe she had worked for Johnson & Johnson for a long time in various product lines. And so she ended up working with a board and then being interviewed and serving on a board with that kind of passion and that skill set in mind. So I would urge you to, yes, look at those hard skills on your resume, look at the finance, look at the cybersecurity, but also what other life experience, that talent can you bring that may be really different? And then from there, how you package that up in your interview and beyond is, I think, maybe a further question or a further conversation.
Great. Ashley, what are your thoughts on, packaging yourself? What's that bio, the resume they're looking for? Did you find that different in your government service versus nonprofit service? What's the profile folks are looking for?
Sure. I did find some differences between governmental boards as well versus nonprofit boards. So just a couple of quick things about nonprofit boards. I really appreciated Stephanie emphasizing sort of that separation of where you are a navigator versus actually doing the work. However, there are some nonprofit boards where you are a working board. Please know that if you join a working board, which often occurs with smaller nonprofits that have far less staff, you're going to work. So that means if you think about the time we're talking about that it may take to be on a more traditional fiduciary board, it's going to be even more work if you're on a working board. So just those are always questions that you can ask the executive director or CEO or the other board member who may be courting you, like, hey, is this a working board or a non-working board when it comes to a nonprofit? Because again, if it is a working board, we actually do need you to go get in the trenches. The majority of the two organizations that I happen to have ran as CEO or an executive director were fiduciary boards. And in that case, for actually both of those boards, it was a period of rebuilding. So I know that Stephanie mentioned sort of a board matrix that corporate boards use all the time. Some of us nonprofits stole them and are using them as well. So we're doing a review of maybe where we're missing supportive individuals with knowledge on our board to help make sure that we're having good guidance and good also outreach, because we're going to throw the ideas of programming also to our board, not for them to do them, but I love getting feedback saying, hey, Ashley, you're missing this group, or hey, have you thought of expanding here? And I can't do that if we don't have a good range of individuals with experience. Also, even in nonprofit boards, depending on which they are, they're not always diverse either. I will say for YW boards, tends to be all women. They don't have to be actually, but you're going to find most of your YWCA boards are very heavy women, but not always diverse. So I worked on diversifying age at the YWCA of Central Virginia, diversifying race, diversifying socioeconomic status. So there was still diversity needed even with a board of incredible women. And we were really able to achieve that. And I have to give lots of thanks to my board president, Sally, at the time for really wanting to have that depth and breadth. At Mental Health America Roanoke Valley, on the other hand, we had a board of 30. It was a very large board, but during the time that I served, I brought the first African-American woman and the first African-American man onto that board. And that was intentional, by the way. So sometimes you are getting asked intentionally, like I shared with 518. Outside of that, there is not always a specific profile. Again, for a YWCA board, we may very much be looking for a woman because it may actually be in our chartering language. For boards that maybe serve other underrepresented groups who serve African-American community members or Latino community members, they may actually be looking for someone who meets being a member of that group. It is possible, it depends on the organization. For government, often we're looking for people who simply are willing to serve. So when you go and look at your local government opportunities specifically, find something that speaks to you. Go look and see if their meetings are recorded so you can know how much time. If you want to be on a planning commission, you're going to give us a lot of time. If you want to be on, I'm going to use one for Charlottesville, the Historic Resources Committee, it might be less time. Sister cities, you might need to go abroad. And you may need to pay for that if you want to go abroad. The city may not be able to do that compensation. So those are other things to look. But I bet all of you, if you go to your locality right now, there is a space for you to apply to serve on a local board. And that's a great place to start as well. Kind of get the best of both worlds. You don't always have the fiduciary duties. Now, some boards do have budgets. So for example, our Sister Cities Board and our actually Historic Resources Boards, there is some responsibility, but many times you maybe don't have a fiduciary responsibility and the meetings may be able to work around your schedule a little better, but that opens the door because I'm going to tell you, once you're on a board, it's a lot easier to get on your next board. State government, again, you're going to apply for those boards, and it depends on how many openings they are. You're never going to know how many people apply, by the way. I have no clue how many people applied when I finally made it onto the Council on Women. Your service will often require travel. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And sometimes they may have something they are looking for, but you may not know it. So for example, if you are applying to be on the board here in Virginia for the Board of Visitors for Virginia Tech, they might be looking for someone who's a tech graduate, but they might not be. They may be looking for an academic, but they may not be. It's not going to tell you. So if you're interested, throw in. That's the best advice I can give, just because it's not going to have any parameters, whereas a lot of local government boards may have parameters. You may need to live in the city or the county. You may need to have a certain tie. If you'd like to be on the hairstylist board, the seat may be for a hairstylist. So for state, it's going to tell you if it's a specific seat. So for example, there are some seats for a local government team member in some state boards. If you're not a local government team member, you can't apply for that seat, but right under it may be an at-large seat.
Thanks. And Whitney, we'd love for you to add in your 2 cents as well.
Yeah, great. I think Ashley and Stephanie did a phenomenal job at answering that question. I'd also just like to add, don't let your presumed skill set hinder you from service. A lot of these times, boards will develop you. They'll develop diverse skill sets for someone who may have a gap in a specific skill set. I know a lot of our board members didn't come in with like, a financial skill set, but due to, wanting to make sure we had a succession plan in place, we train that person to, be really great at financial things so that, the board has someone to go to in the future for those things. So just make it like, even if it's just an interest of yours, put yourself out there. Cause like I said, like Ashley said, a lot of the boards are just looking for people who are willing and eager to serve and have the time. I really want to go back to, the time, talent, and treasure, the 3 T's that she pointed out. That's really important to boards. Even if you only have time for a board, that's really great for, boards that may be having a lot of vacancies or lacking really like the engagement for them to be successful at what they do. And like I said, diversity of thought. You might not really think that your skill set can transfer to a specific board, but it can. I would say I'd be surprised at, the different boards that I've been a part of and that I oversee. I'm just always so surprised at how things intersect, housing and criminal justice and, things like sports. You just be surprised at how often or, how those things can intersect. So if you're just interested in something, if you want to learn more about it, if you want to develop a certain skill set, those are also opportunities to be a part of a board.
Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions from the audience in just a moment. So get ready if folks have some to start dropping them in the chat, or you can, of course, raise your hand and come off mute. But my last question for our panelists before we open it up is, what are those next steps you would advise folks take if they're thinking about board service? Are there courses they can sign up for? Are there websites they should be signing up for, their newsletters, podcasts you listen to, a book you read the first time you served on a board that really was helpful to teach you the skills you needed, whether it was governance or fundraising or that navigator, versus hands-on operator, right? Like what are the ways you learn about board service and all the nuts and bolts of it? And I'll just open this up again for any of our 3 panelists to answer.
I'd go first. Yeah, I would say the ways I learn is definitely one by contacting like the organization that you might be interested in serving on. A lot of the ways that my constituents reach out to me is through my council member and through me. We have a plethora of board vacancies in the city of Richmond for different things, for housing, for criminal justice, any anything you can really think of. And, we have people who are like, hey, I'm retired or I have a lot of times on my hand and I'm just willing to serve and I really want to use my skill set to, help your board. And, I give them a list of the vacancies and help them fill out their applications for whatever they're interested in. So that's one thing for me. And then there are a lot of organizations out here that do trainings on like board service, maybe like Robert's rules, if you don't know anything about that, that will just train you on, how to be a more engaged member of a board. So.
I can speak from the NACD angle. I would say, to our point before, if you do not know your passion and where you are ready to invest that time, that is step number one. Talk to those who know you well. Float this idea by them. What do you think of this? Do you have any experience with this? Cast your net really wide. No one, I will speak for all of my members, no one wants to be approached, hey, I'm trying to get on a board. Can you help me? No one, even Ashley, who just shared such a wealth of information about all the potential government boards in the state of Virginia. It's more of building that relationship, building that community, continuing to go out and saying, hey, I'm considering board service. What are some suggestions? What is some advice you have for me or anyone you may know who may be able to help connect me to resources on that path, and really building from there. I will share a little bit about what NACD has specifically. Right now, if you are at the executive level, we invite you to be a part of our Accelerate program. That includes our certification, which is for board directors and really works through foundations of governance. We mentioned Robert's Rules of Order, a great and very long book to read, but duty of loyalty, duty of care, strategy, cyber risk oversight, things that we hear in the ether and have a hard time pinning down. This program is for you if any of those things are of interest, and really over 2 years works through kind of those key principles. Additionally, without ever even joining NACD, you do have the option to take a few of our virtual courses online or engage with one of our chapter events. And we have a DC area chapter that has regular free events available to people who we would say are board curious. And so I encourage you to just lean in a little bit and see if that's a place that, you get a taste and you're ready for more, kind of the varying levels of commitment there.
Thanks. And Ashley, I don't think we heard from you yet on this piece. I think you're on mute.
Thank you. It would not allow me to unmute. It said that the host said no. Yeah, number one, thank you so much, Whitney and Stephanie, for what you provided, both for governmental and nonprofit boards, as well as corporate boards that I am the least knowledgeable about. So that's super helpful, that you shouldn't go up and just say, hello, friend. Whereas I would tell you for nonprofit boards, sometimes it's perfectly okay to go up and say, hello, friend. I'm interested in board service. And I bet you there's a CEO somewhere with like a glimmer and a smile in their soul. Here in Central Virginia, the Center for Nonprofit Excellence does some board trainings. So they are a good option. And I believe also on their website, they may list where there are spaces specifically more for the nonprofit sector where boards are needed. Also, there's a website called Idealist that lists both paid jobs in nonprofits, but sometimes will list organizations that are looking for board members. As far as things to consider and read, number one, I also like to always say there are Roberta's rules. Again, remember, I ran a YWCA, so it's just a play off of Robert's rules, and Roberta McAdams really established herself as a legislator when women were not legislators. So Roberta is a real person. But Robert's Rules of Order, definitely. There are some podcasts like I-501-CU, which is made specifically for nonprofit board members. But I also would encourage looking at websites such as Joan Gary's website, Blue Avocado, or Board Space. Those are all generally made more for the nonprofit executive, but to learn how nonprofits work. As far as administratively, those give some really good feedback, because what we normally as as community members get to see is the good work they do, not so much the fundraising efforts, what's behind the gala, the grant writing. Those are things we often don't see, but those are things as a board member you may actually be able to contribute to really positively and provide a lot of assistance for our service.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, I'm seeing in the chat, folks are starting to add questions. So we've got a great question here, which is, where would you recommend a young organization look for board members? How does a young organization start to recruit those new board members? So yeah, any thoughts there? We'd love to give out some great advice for a new organization that's building up their first board.
I can start because I was scared to mute myself again, just in case I wasn't able to unmute. I'm going to make a leap and an assumption that our friend is talking perhaps about being a young nonprofit. In those cases, you very much may need to ask in your circle, number one, if there is someone who is in your circle who you believe could be a good board member and not have conflict, because you want your friends to stay your friends. So that is a thought, but also you can ask them, hey, do you know someone who maybe has X skill? So just to give an example from my past life, all of my nonprofits have been direct human service nonprofits. So I, for example, ended up asking a member of a civic group that I was in, who was a dentist, actually, if she would be the first African-American woman to apply and potentially get voted in for Mental Health America of Roanoke Valley. And one of the reasons why was actually to provide a different medical perspective of individuals who see the result of untreated mental illness. Because if you are depressed, you may not be brushing your teeth, for example. Some of your self-care may have gone down. So she actually had a very different touch point. There was a reason why I asked her specifically, but I asked. So I always say sometimes you're going to have to do what we call stacking your board in nonprofits, and that is asking who you need. The worst thing that can happen is they say no. The other thing, again, is you can put ads on places like LinkedIn, on Indeed, on Idealist seeking board members. Please make sure that you put this is not a compensated board. Most nonprofit boards aren't. Some may be if you're working for a large national organization, for example, but you can put those out there or even put feelers out depending. I know Whitney had a lot of great things to say about involving youth. If you're willing to have youth members, you can perhaps put something on Handshake for college students, or if social work might help, write a letter to the dean of a social work school in your area to get and say you are absolutely welcoming students to join you if that fits your needs and your organization.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I would also say use your existing network. Like Ashley said, the worst they can say is no. So just making sure you're using your existing network and asking those close to you, if they can help and how they can help. And making sure that you connect with any professional organizations that you know about. I'm not sure what kind of board that, you're speaking about, but depending on the type of board, there are different professional organizations out there that you can probably connect to. And also, don't be afraid to collaborate with other nonprofits or, government organizations to look for other board members because, like I said, I love to, kind of cross train and take my expertise from one board to another. That's why I serve on multiple boards, and a lot of other board members would be willing to do so as well. And also, higher education institutions. So a lot of students are really out here looking for, leadership roles and roles where they can develop their skill set. So trying to, track down those gaps and seeking people who might have gaps that they need to fill in their leadership roles that can help you with your nonprofit or your board.
Yeah, just well said, Whitney. One word of caution to our friend in the chat. It sounds like you might be kind of at the crux of growth in your organization, and well-written bylaws are not a bad investment. And I know it might seem, and maybe not for you, but somebody else on this call, that things are just moving so fast. You just really need more people. You really need more hands. But from a risk perspective, just from a growth perspective, taking some time to find an attorney and some specific organizations that do support that, even a part of NACD has templates for these types of things, can help both bring people in and help them roll off the board when the time is required.
Thanks. Such great advice from each of our panelists. We have time for one more question. Is there anybody who wants to come off of mute and ask a final question of our panelists?
Folks want to raise their hands. I'm trying to manage all the muting, but so I'll ask a quick question just in case, and then folks, if you please do raise your hand if you have a question, we're happy to try to sneak that in. I'm going to sort of on the opposite end of a newer and younger organization. A lot of us who are later in our career have to wear multiple hats on a daily basis, whether that's serving publicly or serving on a corporate board or serving a government versus a nonprofit. How do you all feel, or what suggestions you have about doing that ethically and appropriately to be able to make sure that you're representing the board that you're going to engage, but also that you're not having those conflicts come up?
Sarah, you bring up a great point, which we didn't really speak about, but I would be very curious to hear our other panelists chat even quickly, which is onboarding. And for me, part of that onboarding process even begins in the interview, because you are really interviewing a board as much as they are interviewing you. Is it a culture fit? Is it a diversity fit, right? Like, and the ability to, I think Ashley mentioned looking at minutes from previous meetings and even just seeing how long they are, or if someone's dominating the conversation. I bring this up because as you're weighing possibilities, as you're balancing your executive role and your potential to serve on a board, all these things I would take into consideration when you're ready to really like kind of pull the trigger and move forward. And having that open conversation with HR is just a plus. Like, it's just a good thing overall. So I don't know if that really answers it directly, but I just wanted to kind of bring that to light, as we really do need to take control of that process. Like I said, they are interviewing us and we are also interviewing them, and to make sure that that's a fit and the right investment for your time.
And I can share from a state perspective, here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, if you are selected to serve on a state board, you will have to fill out a conflict of interest form annually. If you work for a local government, by the way, and certain leadership where you have to fill it out, you will have to do it twice. They will not accept one or the other. You got to do it 2 times. So print it out because you're going to have to do it again. For nonprofit boards, I had, as part of my board orientation, an annual conflict of interest form for individuals to fill out. I cannot tell you that every board is going to do this, every nonprofit board. Probably, again, when you're run by a lawyer, you do things like that. But I would encourage people also to just self-disclose. So again, for example, United Way of Greater Charlottesville knows if they ask for money, I cannot vote on it. And honestly, I got permission from my first city manager that I served at the time to serve on that board. That is why it is the only board in this area I serve on, because I'm able to firewall myself off from any funding asks. They also know I cannot, for example, I can't fundraise for them. And for another group, for example, I can't do anything political. So I actually couldn't even do a get out the vote, because they may wear items that would lean in a political direction. And that is actually an ethical violation for me. So I'm just very honest about them. And it's better to disclose even if you aren't sure if it's really a conflict than to not, because again, you are taking on that fiduciary role, and it's always just better to be safe than sorry. And that also will let your executive director or CEO know if they maybe need to add someone, a board member, to fill a space that now you cannot serve in, or even if they have an advisory committee, for example, to fill that space that they know they can't count on you to help with that, not because you don't want to, but because you can't.
Yeah, I think they bring up good points. I would also like to add, like, even outside of conflict of interest, I know on some boards, you are required to sign fiduciary responsibilities where once per year you're supposed to give X amount of money to a board. And a lot of the times these amounts are small or no specific amount at all. But I would also take that into consideration before joining a board, whether you would have that type of fiduciary responsibility and as well as time commitments. A lot of boards do have, a process for removal of board members if, you aren't engaged in the board. So just making sure, you're upfront about your time commitment and if things do come up that you communicate about some of those things as well.
Well, thank you so much. We have been just so appreciative of our panelists' time today. Would love to give you each 30 seconds, 60 seconds if you want to go on a little bit. I know a minute's super short, to just share any closing thoughts, any final words of wisdom and advice for our audience today. And we'll give it to Stephanie to kick us off on our closeout. So thank you.
I'll keep it simple. We need women on corporate boards. We need diversity on corporate boards. I encourage you to work with your network and see where you might be ready to serve.
Thanks. And Whitney, any final thoughts you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I would just say join a board and fill gaps. Fill gaps that you know need to be filled, fill gaps that you don't think need to be filled. Put yourself out there and just be engaged.
Thank you so much. And Ashley, if you want to wrap it up for us, final advice, words of wisdom.
Sure. I would say, honestly, be bold. If you believe that you can contribute and you're interested, as Whitney noted, like, don't get hung up on what your resume may or may not say. So go ahead and do that ask, and I will give a plea as a local government manager. Please look at your locality's opportunities. Every locality probably has an opportunity, and we need people. You are passionate and motivated enough to show up during lunch for a session. I would love to know that half of you decided to go and sit on a local government board as a way to either add to your current board service or start your board service, and then we can move you up to Stephanie.
Thank you all so much. Again, it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Please continue to look at our website, vawomen.org, to learn about future programs. Thank you again so much to our really kind and generous panelists who shared so much information with us today. And good luck to everybody reaching out and serving on boards. As we heard, there's many opportunities to serve and to get engaged from corporate, nonprofit, and government entities. You can always reach out to us, info@vawomen.org, if you need assistance connecting with different entities and looking for those opportunities to serve. And we are just so glad to have you all here today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Remember, National Voter Registration Day. If you're not registered to vote, go out there and get registered today. Have a fantastic Tuesday, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.